Welcome back to the Life of Tashmia. I'm Tash. Today I've got a bit of a spicy episode for you. I'm going to be talking about my original kink, which was group sex, and talking about sex parties. And then I'm also going to give some tips for people who are thinking about going but not quite sure. So for all you first timers out there, keep listening. So, as I said, one of the first kinks I really got into was group sex. Kind of the thought of multiple bodies, like all pleasuring each other at the same time, just was a massive turn on for me. I'm also a bit of a voyeur and exhibitionist, so the thought of watching and being watched was also a really big thrill for me. So I guess my very first experience that I can remember, I'm pretty sure this was my first experience. It was with it was a threesome with a couple that I had sought out for this particular reason. We met, I remember, at this little wine bar prior for drinks. I was still a non-drinker back then, so non-alcoholic for me. But it was just to make sure like everyone's comfortable and that there's an opportunity for consent, that everyone wanted to do it. And we did. We had a little bit of a chat, I think, for like maybe a couple of hours. And then she actually lived across the road from this wine bar. So the three of us went back to hers. And I can still remember this night. I don't remember every group play I've ever had now, but I can still remember that night. It was wild. It was actually the first time I'd used a strap-on on a girl. And fun side fact, it was the best strap-on I have ever used, and I actually have two of them still in my studio to date. They are just like the best model. Like I've got quite a few different models. This is my go-to model. I was loving the positions. I was loving how we could all like differently put our bodies together and pleasure each other all at once. It was just a really fun night. I couldn't have asked for a better introduction, to be honest. It was, as I said, it was fun, but it was really a respectful introduction for group play, and I really look at it very fondly still. So that kind of began my career as a unicorn, and for those of you who don't know what a unicorn is a term used for a single girl in the swinging scene or with threesomes with couples. It's called a unicorn because they're rare to find. I'm sure you get it now. So I was kind of looking for couples and I would meet up with couples. It's funny when I think about it because when I'm like, I call it play dating, like I'm not looking to have a relationship with these people. But I realized when I was writing this that there's a difference between the way I date couples when I'm a unicorn and the way I like when I'm single and just like play dating solo. Well, the thing I do for both cases is I always meet up in public first, whether it's like at a coffee shop, at a wine bar, like wherever it is, there'll always be like a public encounter first because I want my consent to be enthusiastic. I want it to be a hell fucking yes. I want to do this. But the difference is that when it's with couples, I'll meet them in public first, but if the vibe's right, I'll generally go and play like that night or whenever it is. However, when I'm dating singly, I'll always play on a separate occasion. So I'll go and meet up with them, have a coffee, have a bit of wine bar, have my soda water, and then I will go home and then reach out to them to make the date to actually where we were going to play. And the reason why I've done that, especially when I'm single, is because, again, I want to make sure that I'm saying yes for the right reasons. And I think sometimes when you can meet up with people and talk with them, it's not like you're getting coerced, but maybe sometimes you can get a bit swept up in it and afterwards think, did I actually really want to do that? So that's why I implemented that rule, is that always play on a separate date. So I kind of kicked off my little unicorn career for a while and that was fun. And then life happens, got into relationships. I've said before, I met my daughter's dad in a threesome during this time. And then, now I'm with my husband, and we still do things, but I think it was after I split with my daughter's dad. It was just after I split with my daughter's dad. I was like, you know what? I really want to like go to a swingers club. And I had thought about it towards the end of my relationship, with my daughter's dad. And I did bring it up, but he wasn't really keen and, fair enough. And it was funny because I was having lunch. I was on my lunch break because I was still working corporate back then. And I met up with one of my friends from my MBA. And he just randomly suggested that he really wanted to go to a swingers club. But as a guy, you can't go single. You need a girl to get in. So swinger rules are generally that couples and single girls are allowed. Some nights they will allow a select few single guys that are like pre-screened and vetted, but otherwise, and generally you have to kind of know people, I think, to do that. Otherwise, if you're a guy, you've got to come as a couple. So obviously he was like sussing it out with me. And I was like, this is really strange because I've been thinking about it and I really want to go. So we kind of came up with the rules between him and I because we were like purely just friends. So we're like, there's no touching between us. Like this is just for you and me to go together for our first time. No touching between us. So he picked me up, I think it was a Saturday evening, and we went for dinner. And I just remember he told me later, he's like, you were eating so slow at dinner. And I was just thinking, hurry the fuck up. But eventually I finished my dinner and we went to this terrace house which hosted the club. The club was this terrace house in Darlinghurst, and we like rang the bell and out comes this woman. She took our names. We paid a membership fee. She gave us a card, like the entry fee as well. And then we got a bit of a club tour and were told the club like rules/etiquette. This cute blonde Canadian girl was also there on the tour with us. She arrived similar time to us and it was also her first time. So we got to go on the tour with her, luckily. So you're kind of shown there's like a locker room where you put away, your clothes. Generally, you'll probably get changed at least into your underwear or maybe something more comfortable. Phones obviously are all away. Downstairs, there was like this little bar. Funnily enough, in Australia, you can't have a sex on premise license and sell alcohol. So you actually, if you want to drink, you give them your alcohol and then they have mixes and everything. So that's the way it's kind of done here. There was like next to the bar, there was this like little, I say dungeon, but now that I'm a dom, it's not like a dungeon. It was like a little play dungeon area and then a lounge area. And then upstairs, there's like more playrooms and there was also a spa out the back. So the etiquette was downstairs. You could be fully clothed or however you want, but upstairs you had to be either like in your lingerie, a towel or naked. And no drinks upstairs, I remember for some reason was a rule. So with the playrooms, if the door was shut and occupied, that means no one's allowed in. If the door is open but with the rope across the entrance, that means you can watch but no entry. And then if the door's open and there's no rope, that means you can enter the room. That doesn't give you permission to join them. Consent is massive at swinger clubs and sex parties. It's very direct and straightforward. You need to ask everyone anything you want to do. Literally, like I had people come up to me, can I kiss you? Like it's very direct. Can I go down on you? Nothing is taken offensively. So a no is not taken like, like it's just like, okay, cool. Like that's fine. And everyone moves on. There's condoms and lubes galore. You have sheets to change the bedding afterwards and there's showers. So after we had our little tour, we got some drinks, sat in the lounge area, and we were still chatting with this Canadian girl. And at one point, someone suggested like, oh, how about we go upstairs and like have a spa? We're like, oh yeah, that's good. It's a good way to break the ice. So we got in the spa and then kind of the three of us started to play together. Me and my friend maintained our rule of no touching, him always at one end and me always at the other end. And then we got out of the spa, and as we literally got out of the spa, we met another couple. And then we started chatting to them for a while, and then the five of us decided to go down to the little like play dungeon area, and then the five of us all played down there. So again, my first experience really could not have been better. I went with someone I really trusted, and I had a really fun time with some really lovely, sexy people. And I say this because I have gone plenty of other times where I've turned up, not been interested in anyone, and gone home. And that could have easily been my first experience. Like, it's not like that has happened just randomly. It's happened more than once. And I think if that had been my first experience, it could have put me off. So a few years later, I decided to run some small private sex parties myself. I guess I was just looking for something where there wasn't going to be a risk of me turning up and not being interested. I could curate the crowd myself. I knew quite a few people because I'd been in the scene for a while now that were in the scene and keen to participate in parties that I would run. And then I also knew people who were not in the scene but keen to do something if it was small and private and curated. So I'd cap it around 20 people. I think maybe the most we ever had was around 25. Sometimes we had a bit less. I always aim for it to be slightly high ratio of guys to girls. The reason being is, from my personal experience, I found that if there's more guys than girls, all the bisexuality in the females is quashed. I don't know if it's just like there's too much dick in the room to service or something, but I have been at play parties with girls who I have played with at previous parties, and nothing happens between us when there's been too many guys. So I always try to keep that ratio a little bit higher. There's still a lot of stigma around guys' sexual fluidity still in the swinging scene, which I think is a real shame. And look, that's a separate whole nother long conversation about societal norms and things like that. Because, girls who don't identify as bisexual will still play with other girls at sex parties, I have found. And no one afterwards is then labeling them or questioning their sexuality. But with guys, it's different. And I still find that, and it's not right, and I think it's completely wrong. But there's just a bit more, I think, judgment on it from other people and more so other males. So I would hire like a 2 to 3 bedroom luxury apartment with that, and I'd make sure it had like a big open like lounge room, kitchen area, a dining room area, because the first part of the evening would just be kind of like socializing with drinks, and then we'd go into some like fun games, like anything from like the Cars of Humanity, like just like fun stuff that's not even sexual, to things like maybe later on like sex Jenga, which is Jenga where you like pull down a little tile and it'll have like do a striptease or like kiss someone or something. Now, if someone pulled something they didn't want to do it, there was no pressure. No one had to do anything they didn't want to. They didn't even have to participate in the game if they didn't want to. But it was just kind of like a fun way to like get everybody socializing, because, people might come with someone they knew or a couple of people they knew, but there'd be new people there as well. So just a good way to people to mix and see who they really like vibed with. Because I know for me, even at sex parties or swinger clubs, I still want to like connect and vibe with the person. It's just not a free fall for me. I'm not just going to sleep with everyone there. I'm going to realize, okay, who am I connected with? Who am I vibing with? And that's who I'm going to like play with or pursue that night. So I made it very clear before everyone came that they were more than welcome just to come for the social half and leave. I'm not sure if anyone actually did that. Maybe once or twice, but not very often. Also, they were more than welcome to stay and watch. Also, if you came like as a couple, you're more than welcome to just play as a couple and be in the environment. If you weren't, ready to play that yet, that was always completely fine. Play usually kicked off at some point during the games. Something would happen, someone would start something, and then it was kind of like game on. It was never like an actual moment. It just always naturally went that way. We had the same consent rules apply. Everyone, again, was informed prior. Explicit consent was necessary. We never had any breaches of consent happen. And look, I had some extremely hot nights there. It's probably some of the best group plays I've ever had. But it was quite a lot of stress, like the organization aspect for me. And I just remember every time leading the couple of days that were leading up, I'd have people drop out. Like, I guess some people get nervous, that's fine. But it meant I had to fill up their spots for ratios. So then I'd have to be like contacting everyone that I knew, like, are you free? Are you able to come? You can fill in this spot. And so I start stressing about it because I really wanted to provide an amazing experience for people. I knew personally that your first introduction to something could really make or break your view of that thing. And I knew that for a lot of people that were coming, it was their first party, their first introduction to group. And the only reason that they were coming is because they felt comfortable to come to my sex party. Like, it was run by me and they trusted me. And I took that responsibility very seriously. So I just really wanted to make it such a good, fun night for everyone. But because of the stress, and at the end of every party, I would have the best time. But I remember I'd turn to my best friend and say, if I want to run another one of these, like, don't let me. And then a month or so would pass and I'd like forget the stress and then I'd do it again. But I finally got, like, a couple of years ago, I did hold my last one and I said, if I ever talk about running another one, shoot me. But at this point, my brand and my business was building up and it was my priority, and it still is. And I just did not, and I still don't have the capacity for the stress to run one of the evenings, even though they were the most fun, amazing evenings when they happened. But look, it was, I never ran it at a profit. I even ran it at a loss sometimes. So it wasn't about making money for me. I didn't make any money out of it. It was literally just about providing something that I wasn't really finding at the time. So now I still really enjoy group activities, even though I'm not running parties, and I'm not really going to any bigger parties. I haven't really found many that I probably would want to go to at the moment. So now I'm mainly doing just smaller things, in 3s, 4s, like maximum 6 maybe. I have a different relationship with different group experiences. They're really good fun and consensual pleasure. It's a great way to live out your fantasies in a really respectful way as well. But more often, like, smaller things with my husband and I, especially if we're like dating someone together at the time, they can actually be really intimate and very special evenings. While as opposed to the group things, I mean, there still definitely is a level of intimacy I have experienced there, but I do think it's a bit more of a, adrenaline rush, a bit of more of a fantasy, a bit more of a just like let loose, have fun, break free from societal norms. But yeah, I am definitely still is one of my big kinks that I love. So on to my advice for first timers or people that would like to try but not really sure about how you go about it. Of course, number one is communication. Like with everything, I always say communication is king. It's no different here. So I'm going to go from the perspective first of, because if you both want to go in a relationship, obviously there's no issue with this first part. You'll still want to listen in for the second part. But if one person in the relationship wants to try group stuff or maybe go to a sex party or swingers club, this is how I would try and approach it with the partner. Look, your partner does not have any obligation to go with you. It's the same with any kink or fetish or sexual experience or activity. No one has to do something for someone else. They need to want to also do it for themselves. So first rule is, like, if they don't want to do it and they really don't want to discuss much about it, that's their right. I do recommend bringing it up in a respectful way because you might be able to find some common ground once your partner understands maybe what it is about the reason you want to go. I mentioned exhibitionism before, someone who likes being watched. So your partner might say, look, I'm not really comfortable in being in a swinging environment, but I'm happy to have, sex on our balcony where maybe the neighbors could see, because that still might give you a bit of that thrill, a bit of that kink being met. So that's why I say, like, you might be able to bring up, like, find some common ground. As always, find appropriate time to speak about it. Don't do it when you're like, well, when they're getting like dinner ready for the kids, or, you're about to go to work. Like, find some time where you're going to have space to talk. Don't just like go all in. Don't be like, I've had this fantasy. I want to fuck like 30 people on one night and I want you to sit in the corner and watch me. Like, that's just going to overwhelm somebody. Like, gently test the waters. Like, maybe bring up someone you know. You might know someone that went to a sex party. Like, like Sarah down the street. She went to this party and like, what do you think about that? Or maybe, it's a film you watch together or something like that. And then ask what they think. You might say like, look, I find it quite intriguing and I'm interested in exploring it further. Like, what do you think? They might need some space at this point. They might need, because it might not be something they've thought about. And so you don't want to get someone's like knee-jerk reaction to something. If they haven't thought about it, just say, look, why don't you think a few days and like, let's come back on Thursday and like discuss what you think. And look, they might come back and say it's not for them. They might suggest something else, as I mentioned before. You might be comfortable with that compromise. You might not be. They might be happy for you to go and do that with someone else or go and do that alone, depending on what your relationship type is. But if they're not interested and they really don't want to go, that's for them to decide, and you can't pressure someone into doing it. The only thing I can suggest is you need to decide for yourself how important it is for you and your life. If they are keen, these are the next steps. You need to plan. So now both of you are keen, whether you had to go through the pre-chat or not. Or even if you're someone who doesn't have a partner and you're solo, I would still recommend you planning. You need to decide how you want to start. Your end goal might be a full-blown sex party, but that might be a bit too far-fetched for one of you or both of you. So you might say, like, maybe we do a smaller group thing, or maybe we try and just meet up with one other person in a bar and see how that goes and see how we feel. As you probably think it's going to be reverse, I actually think the parties are actually a bit easier way to dip your toes into it than doing something with another one person or a smaller, more intimate thing. The good thing about large events is it's easy to take those baby steps because you can just go and watch. Like, you don't need to participate. You don't even really need to talk to anyone. Like, when you're in a smaller, more intimate setting or with just one other person, like, there's a bit more pressure to like do something or to engage at least. So I highly recommend this for first timers. Just going and watching can be extremely thrilling and exciting. And then you'll probably see if it turns you on. You might find that it actually wasn't what you thought it was going to be. So, or maybe you thought I'd feel a certain way. I thought I'd feel really turned on and I didn't. Or, you don't know what's going to come up for you. So that's why I say it's good to kind of dip your toes first, just to gauge like what your reaction is, and also if you're with someone, what your partner's reaction is. You might decide, do you want to participate? Maybe that time you might decide, look, next time we participate, like let's work our way up. I think working your way up is a good way to go if you're both quite new to it, because you do want to have that time where you leave and can chat, which I'll discuss a little later. Again, when you're in the moment at something, you might find you do something you might later regret doing because you haven't had that space to kind of like decompress and think about it. So if you are going in for participation now, again, you need to negotiate and communicate boundaries. You need to scenario plan. Now, look, you won't be able to scenario plan everything that's going to happen. Me and my husband have been playing for a long time together, and we still get surprised by things that we just didn't expect would pop up. But we know how to talk about it, and then we know how to resolve it very easily. And often those things end up bringing us closer together. That's the other thing that people might not expect, actually, is you will find by bringing outside people into your relationship, it will actually bring you closer together. And some people like myself, I love this aspect of it. Other people, especially if they're new into a relationship, it might freak them out a little bit. Especially, as I said, especially if you're just kind of like in the early stages of a relationship. So that's also something to maybe keep in mind. It's something that I did a few times early on in relationships with people who were kind of new to the scene, new to open, and I kind of went 110% on them all at once, and it kind of freaked them out. So I learned from my experience. As I said, as a single, you still need to plan. You still need to have boundaries for yourself. In group situations, you don't want to wake up the next day and regret something you did or something you really weren't comfortable doing. I recommend, if you're single, to try and go with someone you trust. I know this is impossible for everyone. It doesn't have to be someone you want to play with. As I said, I went with one of my really close friends I really, really trust, who's still in my life today. And I am so happy I had my first experience with him. We still laugh about it, even if it's just a support person. But as I said, look, it's not possible for everyone. But if you can, I recommend that. You need to decide on things like what happens if one of us is approached, not as a couple, but as separate. You need to think about, how do we signal to each other if we're approached by a couple, but one of us doesn't want to play? What about veto rights? Veto rights if you're approached by someone, does your partner get veto rights if they're not cool with it? If they're not really vibing that person, they don't really like that person for you, you got to think about what's allowed. Kissing, oral, vaginal, anal, DP, there's quite a big list of things that can happen. So what are you comfortable with happening? What are some things you might want to reserve for just you and your partner, or you and someone else in the future? Are you allowed to swap details with someone that you played with or you met at a party? What happens if you see someone you know from the outside world there? I mean, I have run into people I've known. I ran into a girl I knew through schooling years. I mean, they're there as well. So it's not really a big deal. But still, some people might want to consider that. You might run into someone from work. How will you deal with the emotions, seeing your partner with someone else? Emotions are going to arise for you. Emotions still arise for me these days. Ones that I don't expect sometimes, but I know how to look at them and I know how to observe them and think, oh, wow, that's, I look at it more as, oh, that's interesting, that's coming up. But these are all things that you need to consider. So again, I suggest baby steps for those who are a little bit unsure. Maybe pick a couple of things you want to try and test the waters, build your way up. Maybe you say tonight we're going to go and it's just going to be you can kiss someone and then we're going to see how we feel about that, etc. I also just want to say you need to be aware there are predators out there. And I've said this about the kink scene as well. The kink scene, the swinging scene, it's not immune from predators. It's like the outside world. While I do say a lot of the time I do find there's less amount maybe, there still are predators. And you need to trust your gut. 90% of my experiences in the scene have been really, really positive. But I've seen, there's a 10% of people that I will keep very much well away from in the scene. And it's now gotten to the point where if I know that particular person is going to be somewhere, then I won't go there. I have seen some very unethical behavior. And so because I feel very strongly about my stance in regards to ethical play, I just simply won't associate myself with that anymore. So trust your gut. That's a big one. Our gut instincts were formed millions of years ago as a survival mechanism, or otherwise we would end up dead. Now, I'm not saying you're going to end up dead, but trust your gut. When you go, my biggest advice next is to keep your boundaries. there's nothing worse than fucking up your relationship in a very public way, which I have witnessed at parties. You know, someone's done something they weren't meant to, and then a fight explodes. Not cool, not sexy. So if someone wants to pull the plug, let them. If someone's in a situation, they're like, I'm not feeling comfortable, I want to go, don't pressure them. You need to go. Afterwards, it's communicate and debrief. Me and my partner actually have sex first. For some reason, afterwards, even though we've been having sex all night, we feel very connected and, close to each other, as I said. So generally we'll be intimate with each other. And then afterwards we'll kind of like snuggle, and that's when we'll have our chat. Look, I know there's probably plenty of people out there who afterwards would think of nothing worse than chatting afterwards, but it's really crucial you do. As I said, you're going to be experiencing emotions you likely haven't experienced before. And you're also going to be, we've been socially programmed. We've been socially programmed by society that if our partner's having sex with someone else, that means there's something wrong with us. So it's not going to be easy just for you to switch those off. It's going to take time for you to talk that through and for your brain to kind of reprogram itself into, no, that's not what it means. This is what I felt. How do I work my way through this? And that's when we really need to understand the concept of compersion, which is a swinging term. It's described as the opposite of jealousy. It's when you get pleasure from seeing your partner or someone else get pleasure. It's a beautiful emotion if you're someone who has experienced it. I love to experience it. I love to sit back and watch my partner with someone else, or see them with someone else, or just hear about them with someone else. It's a really beautiful emotion once you can embrace it. But we haven't been taught it in society growing up. We've been taught quite the opposite, which is not right. Look, at the end of the day or night, in the case, it's about exploring your sexuality. It's about exploring your pleasure. It's about connecting with yourself, and maybe connecting with a partner. A lot can arise from attending a sex party or being involved in group play. So as I said, it will really require you to examine your beliefs and things you might have been told as a child or led to believe by society. It may actually be really confronting for some people. It might bring out some aspects of themselves that they weren't aware of. It might bring out things that they need to work through. And that's why it's so important that we approach it with mindfulness, and we continually check in with ourselves and our partners if you're going with someone and having that experience. So I hope that gave you some good tips on how to approach it if you're a newbie or wanting to give it a try. And as always, stay kinky.